The day my grandparents' lawyer called me, I thought it was going to be routine. A few signatures, maybe some old family keepsakes, maybe a little money for starting life out. That's what I imagined. After all, I was the youngest in the family, the one still figuring things out, not the one anyone would expect to walk away with much. But the moment I picked up the phone, his voice carried a weight that made my chest tighten. "Hello, this is Mr. Saunders. I have some important news regarding your grandparents' estate. I'll need you to come into the office this week." My heart sank. Even though my grandparents had passed away just a few weeks before, it still didn't feel real. My grandma had always been my safe place. The one who slipped me extra cookies when Mom said no. The one who told me I was capable of more than I believed. My grandfather was quiet but strong. The kind of man who would work in silence and never ask for recognition. Losing them felt like a hole I couldn't fill. So when the lawyer called, I didn't think of money. I thought of grief. I thought of family pictures, old letters, maybe dividing up antiques or furniture. I thought of closure. But what I heard in his office completely shattered everything I thought I knew. He cleared his throat, looked down at the folder in front of him, then raised his eyes and said the words that froze me in place. "You've inherited $31.5 million. At first, I thought I misheard him. 31,000? Maybe 300,000. Even that would have been unbelievable. But he repeated it, slowly, as though each number carried its own gravity. 31.5 million. I swear my jaw almost hit the polished oak desk. I had to grip the arms of the chair, just to stop my hands from shaking. For context, I was 24 years old. I was broke, drowning in nearly $70,000 of student loan debt, and working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. One at a coffee shop, another doing late-night shifts at a warehouse. The most money I had ever seen in my account at one time was maybe $1,200. On payday, before rent, utilities, and bills snatched it all away again. And now, suddenly, I was a multimillionaire. I looked around the office, expecting cameras to pop out, like it was some prank reality show. But no, this was real. The lawyer slid the documents across the desk, and there it was in black and white. My name, my grandparents' signatures, and the number that didn't even feel real. $31,500,000. My mind went blank, then raced all at once. 31 million? That was more than I could ever spend in 10 lifetimes. That was more than celebrities I read about sometimes. That was private jets, mansions, cars, freedom. And yet, at that exact moment, all I felt was shock. Shock, and guilt. Because here I was, the least together member of the family, inheriting something that could change not just my life, but generations after me. I thought of my parents, my siblings, my cousins. Surely this couldn't all be for me. Surely there was a mistake. "Are you sure this isn't divided among the family?" I asked, my voice trembling. The lawyer gave me a small, knowing smile. "Your grandparents were very clear. This portion is yours alone. They wanted you to have a future free from financial struggle." I blinked, tears threatening to well up. My grandparents had always believed in me. When my parents called me lazy for switching majors, when I dropped out for a semester because I couldn't afford tuition, when I worked extra shifts just to survive, they were the ones who said, "Don't give up. Your time will come." And now, here it was. My time, my chance. But here's the thing about sudden fortune. People think it's all happiness, champagne, and celebration. They don't tell you about the fear that creeps in. The weight of knowing people will look at you differently. The gnawing worry that everyone will suddenly want something from you. As I walked out of that office, clutching the envelope with the official documents, I had no idea how right that fear would be. Because while I stood there imagining a better future, my own parents, the two people who raised me, were already planning how to take it from me. I didn't know it then, but that $31.5 million wasn't just an inheritance. It was a test of loyalty, trust, and family. And I was about to learn that sometimes the people you expect to protect you are the very ones waiting to betray you. Telling my parents about the inheritance should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I imagined they'd hug me, maybe cry tears of joy, maybe even say, "We're so proud of you." After all, wasn't this what every parent wanted? For their child to finally have stability, a chance at a better life. But reality hit me like a brick. When I sat them down in our living room and told them the lawyer's words, I inherited $31.5 million. Their faces didn't light up. There were no gasps of happiness, no celebration. Instead, silence hung in the air, so thick I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My dad was the first to speak. He leaned back in his recliner, crossed his arms, and asked, in the flattest tone I've ever heard, "So, how much of that belongs to us?" I blinked, stunned. I thought he was making a dry joke, the kind he sometimes tossed out when bills were high. So I gave a nervous laugh and said, "None. It's in my name." But the look on his face didn't change. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I realized he wasn't joking. Before I could process it, my mom leaned forward, her voice sharp, serious, almost accusing. "Your grandparents wouldn't want you to keep it all. That money is family property. It belongs to all of us." I froze. Family property. My mind flashed back to the lawyer's exact words. The clear black and white line in the will that said it was mine alone. But now here were my parents, the people who had raised me, acting as though I was just a temporary holder of the fortune, not its rightful heir. I tried to push back gently. "Mom, Dad, the will was very clear. The lawyer said it's..." My dad cut me off. "Don't you dare talk down to us about wills. We know your grandparents better than you ever did. They raised me, not you. Do you really think they meant for you, a kid still figuring life out, to sit on all that money while the rest of the family struggles?" His words stung, hard. Because here's the truth. I was still figuring life out. I was 24, living in a tiny rented apartment, working 2 dead-end jobs, barely surviving paycheck to paycheck. And now I had more money than I knew what to do with. Did I really deserve it? Or did my parents have a point? But deep down, I remembered what the lawyer told me. My grandparents had written it with purpose. They wanted me to have this. It wasn't an accident. Steel comma. My mom's guilt tripping started almost immediately. She clasped her hands together and said, "Sweetheart, think about everything we've done for you. We fed you, clothed you, gave you a roof over your head. Do you really think it's fair for us to grow old with nothing while you hoard millions?" I flinched at the word hoard. I hadn't even touched the money yet. I hadn't bought a new car. I hadn't splurged on anything. And already, they were accusing me of being greedy. For a brief moment, I wished I had never told them. I wished I had kept the inheritance a secret, locked away in the vault of my heart where no one could reach it. Because the look in their eyes wasn't love. It was hunger. It was the same look I'd seen on strangers, begging for money outside the grocery store. Except this time, it came from my own parents. The conversation spiraled quickly. My dad slammed his hand on the arm of his chair and said, "We deserve our share. You wouldn't even exist without us. Remember that. And that's when it clicked. They didn't see this money as a gift left for me. They saw it as their prize, their ticket, out of bills and mortgages and retirement worries. They saw me as the obstacle standing in the way. I wanted to scream, "This isn't how it works. This isn't what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." But instead, I sat there, heart racing, mouth dry, as the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally made it clear that money had conditions. And the scariest part, this was only the beginning. If I thought my parents' first reaction was shocking, what came next was worse. The pressure began almost immediately, like a slow, constant drip of water that eventually feels like torture. At first, it was a few casual comments. My dad would call and ask, "So, when are you planning to move us into a bigger house?" As if it were already a done deal. My mom would say things like, "I saw this car today." "Oh, not for me, of course, but you could easily afford it." But within days, those comments turned into something darker. My phone started blowing up. Missed calls stacked on top of each other. When I didn't answer, the text messages rolled in, one after another, like bullets fired from a gun. From my dad. "Don't be selfish. You wouldn't have a dime of that without us raising you. Your grandparents would want us comfortable, too." And from my mom, the guilt-tripping queen herself. "Do you really think we can retire with nothing while you live like a king? We're your parents. You owe us this. If you loved us, you'd share." Each text chipped away at me. Here I was, holding a life-changing inheritance. And instead of feeling happy or free, I felt like a criminal who had stolen something that didn't belong to me. I remember one night sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at my phone as it buzzed. On the table, over and over, my parents' names lit up the screen so many times, I had to flip it face down just to breathe. I wanted to throw it across the room. Inside, comma. I felt this storm brewing. Guilt, anger, confusion. I kept asking myself, am I selfish? Do I owe them? Should I just give them some to make the noise stop? But then another part of me whispered, this isn't what Grandma and Grandpa wanted. I thought back to the will, the exact words. This inheritance is for our grandchild's future, not for the family, not to be divided, but for me. They saw something in me, even when no one else did. They wanted me to have a chance at life, without struggling the way they had. Still, comma, the guilt trip worked its poison. I started losing sleep. I'd toss and turn at night, hearing my mom's voice in my head. How can you let us suffer while you're sitting on millions? I imagined them growing old, paying bills they couldn't afford, while I had the means to help. One evening, my dad called, and this time I picked up. The second I said hello, he launched straight into it. Listen, son, you can't keep ignoring us. We've done everything for you, and now it's your turn to give back. That money isn't just yours. It's family property. Dad, I said, trying to stay calm. That's not what the will says. He cut me off. His voice rose, sharp, almost threatening. Don't you get smart with me. Without me, you wouldn't even be alive to get that money. You owe us. Don't make me say it again. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream back, but my voice barely came out. Dad, it's not about owing. I want to help, but this isn't the way. Click. He hung up on me. That night, I realized it wasn't just pressure anymore. It was war. My parents weren't asking for help. They were demanding it, expecting it, trying to twist my emotions until I cracked. They didn't see me as their child anymore. They saw me as a walking bank account. And the worst part, their persistence was working. Every time my phone buzzed, every time my mom cried on the voicemail about how hard life was, I felt weaker. Like if I just gave them something, anything, it would make it stop. But deep down, a tiny flame of resolve kept burning. I remembered my grandparents' smiles, their words of encouragement, the way they always told me I was capable of more. They didn't give me this money so my parents could bully it out of me. They gave it to me to build something better. And that was the thought that kept me sane. Because while my parents turned up the pressure, day after day, I knew I couldn't give in. If I did, it wouldn't just be a few $1,000s here or there. It would never end. Once they got a taste, they'd keep taking until nothing was left. So I made a decision. Quietly, secretly, I started planning how to protect myself. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival. By the time a week had passed, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. My phone never stopped buzzing. My parents' words followed me everywhere. Even when I tried to work, even when I tried to sleep. Their guilt, their anger, their constant demands. It was suffocating me. So when the lawyer, Mr. Saunders, called and asked me to come back to his office, I agreed immediately. Honestly, I needed answers. I needed clarity. Deep down, I was starting to wonder if maybe my parents were right. Maybe I really was being selfish. I walked into the law office. The same polished oak furniture. The same smell of old paper and coffee lingering in the air. Mr. Saunders gave me a sympathetic look, like he already knew the storm I was caught in. I think, he said gently, it's time you saw the full will. He placed a thick folder on the desk and slid it toward me. My heart thudded in my chest as I opened it. The first pages were legal jargon, full of phrases I barely understood. But then my eyes landed on the section that spelled everything out clearly. My grandparents had been crystal clear. All $31.5 million was mine. They left my parents smaller inheritances, some savings accounts, a vacation property, and personal belongings. And then, in bold, unmistakable language, this inheritance is for our grandchild's future. It is not to be claimed as shared family property. I stared at those words, my throat tightening. It felt like a lightning bolt hit me right in the chest. My grandparents knew. They had seen this coming. Somehow, they had anticipated the exact fight I was living through now. They knew my parents might try to twist things, to guilt me, to claim what wasn't theirs. And they left no room for doubt. It wasn't suggested. It wasn't implied. It was written in black and white, unshakable, undeniable. The money was mine. I looked up at Mr. Saunders, my voice barely a whisper. They actually wrote that. He nodded. They were very deliberate. They loved your parents, of course, but they wanted to make sure your future was secure. They saw potential in you, and they didn't want anyone interfering with what they left you. My eyes burned with tears. I thought back to my grandparents, the way Grandma always told me, one day you'll do something great, even when I was failing classes. The way Grandpa would quietly slip me gas money when my parents refused to help. The way they always treated me like I mattered, even when the rest of the family dismissed me. They hadn't just left me money. They had left me faith, trust, safety net. They didn't believe anyone else could be trusted to protect. But instead of feeling relieved, a wave of guilt crashed over me. My parents were right about one thing. I was young, still figuring out my life. What if I messed this up? What if I wasted everything? What if I let my grandparents down? I voiced that fear aloud. What if I can't handle it? What if they were wrong about me? Mr. Saunders leaned forward, his tone calm but firm. They weren't wrong. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had plenty of time to think about this decision. If they left it to you, it's because they believed you'd make the right choices. I sat back, letting his words sink in. For the first time in weeks, the constant noise of my parents' demands grew quieter in my mind. Still, comma. A shadow lingered. I could already imagine my dad's angry face. My mom's tearful guilt trips. The endless arguments that would erupt the moment they heard about this clause. If they were this relentless already, what would they do when I showed them the will that shut down every one of their arguments? Would they back off, or would they fight harder? I ran my fingers across the page, tracing the words my grandparents had written, not to be claimed as shared family property. It was so clear, so final, but I also knew one terrifying truth. Clarity on paper doesn't always stop people blinded by greed. And my parents weren't about to let $31.5 million slip out of their hands without a fight. As I closed the folder, Mr. Saunders gave me a steady look. You need to prepare yourself. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about control. Don't let anyone take from you what was meant for you. I nodded, my hands trembling. But in that moment, I felt something spark inside me. Resolve, strength, maybe even a little defiance. Because now I knew, without any doubt, what my grandparents wanted. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own parents, destroy their final wish for me. I knew the moment of truth couldn't be avoided forever. My parents weren't going to stop pushing, and I couldn't live under constant guilt and manipulation. So, I made a decision. I would show them the will. No more vague explanations. No more arguing over the phone. The facts were right there in black and white. The night of the showdown, I invited them over to my apartment. The place was small, barely enough room for a kitchen table, but somehow the walls felt even tighter with both of them sitting across from me. My mom had her arms folded, her face already set in a scowl. My dad sat back in his chair, jaw clenched, his foot tapping against the floor. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they could hear it. I slid the folder across the table, the one Mr. Saunders had given me, and opened it to the section that spelled everything out. Here's the will, I said, my voice shaking at first, but steadying as the words left my mouth. The inheritance is legally mine. Grandpa and Grandma were crystal clear about it. My dad's face turned red instantly. He didn't even glance at the paper. He slammed his palm against the table so hard my glass of water rattled. This is ridiculous, he barked. We raised you. Without us, you wouldn't even exist to inherit this money. I flinched but forced myself to hold his stare. For once, I wasn't going to shrink back like a scared kid. My mum leaned forward, her eyes wide with fury. You think you can just keep $31 million while we struggle, while we sit here worrying about bills, retirement, and medical costs? That's not fair. I felt my throat tighten. Every word was meant to cut deep, to make me feel like a traitor to my own blood. And for a moment, it worked. I imagined them scraping by, my mom clipping coupons, my dad dragging himself to a job he hated. Meanwhile, I had more than enough to change all of that. But then I remembered my grandparents' words. This inheritance is for our grandchild's future. It is not to be claimed as shared family property. And something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I looked my parents directly in the eyes and said, slowly, clearly, with no hesitation, it's not family property, it's mine. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom's mouth fell open, as if she couldn't believe I'd spoken back to her. My dad's face twisted with rage, his fists clenching on the table. You ungrateful little brat, he hissed. After everything we sacrificed for you, food on the table, clothes on your back, college tuition, this is how you repay us. I clenched my jaw. You didn't pay for my college. I'm the one drowning in student loans. And food, clothes, that wasn't charity. That was your responsibility as parents. Don't twist it into something I owe you $30 million for. My dad stood up so fast, his chair screeched against the floor. He towered over me, pointing a finger inches from my face. You're making a huge mistake. Money like that, it destroys families. If you don't share it, you'll regret it. I stood too, my knees trembling, but my voice firm. No, Dad. What destroys families is greed. And you've proven it. My mom tried to soften things, switching back into her guilt-tripping tone. She grabbed my hand across the table and whispered, "Sweetheart, we're not asking for everything. Just enough to make life easier for us. We're your parents. We deserve that much." I pulled my hand back. You already got your inheritance. Grandpa and Grandma left you things too. This, I pointed to the will. This was their choice, their wish, and I'm going to honor it, whether you like it or not. My dad let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You'll see. Money won't protect you from family. We'll find a way. His words hung in the air like a threat, and in my gut, I knew he meant them. As they stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I sat back at the table, my whole body trembling. I should have felt relieved, maybe even victorious, but all I felt was a hollow ache. Because I'd just taken the first real stand of my life against the two people who were supposed to love me the most. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the battle. It was only the beginning. If I thought the argument at my apartment was the peak of the storm, I was dead wrong. That was only the spark. What came after was the wildfire. Within days, my parents escalated things in a way I never imagined. They started calling relatives, uncles, aunts, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, and spinning a story about me. Not the truth, not the will, their version. According to them, I wasn't a grandson who had been entrusted with an inheritance. No, I was the greedy child who stole family money. It didn't take long before I started getting the messages. First comma. It was a cousin I hadn't seen since high school. Hey, heard about your big win. Congrats, man. Listen, I've got this business idea. Maybe you'd like to invest. Only need about $50,000 to start. Then another. Bro, can you help me out with a down payment for a house? Just a loan. Your family, right? And then another. Your parents said you're sitting on millions while the rest of us are struggling. Don't you think that's unfair? At first, I tried to be polite, brushing them off. Sorry, I'm not in a position to help right now. But the more I said no, the uglier the messages became. One uncle called me directly, his voice dripping with contempt. You think you're better than the rest of us now. You're nothing without your family. You don't deserve a penny of that money. I sat there with the phone pressed against my ear, my stomach twisting. This was an uncle who never once called me on my birthday, who never offered me help when I was drowning in student loans. Now suddenly, I was supposed to be his savior. The hypocrisy burned. And behind all of it, I could hear the echo of my parents. They were the ones fueling this. They were the ones whispering in everyone's ear, telling them I was hoarding what should have been shared. They were turning the entire family against me. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. These were people who barely cared I existed before. People who never checked in, never offered support when I struggled. And now, suddenly, I was valuable. But not as a person, only as a wallet. It felt like the entire family had turned against me overnight. At family gatherings, I was the quiet one in the corner, ignored. Now my phone buzzed nonstop, flooded with requests, demands, even insults. When I didn't comply, I remember one message in particular. A cousin wrote, You're a disgrace. Your grandparents wanted to help the family, not just you. You should be ashamed. I wanted to scream back. Did you even read the will? Did you even know them the way I did? But I didn't reply. What was the point? They didn't want the truth. They wanted a payday. The pressure became unbearable. I stopped answering calls. I muted group chats. I avoided social media because every post turned into an attack. It was like I had suddenly become the villain in my own family's story. One night, my mom left me a voicemail. Her voice trembled, but it wasn't sadness. It was manipulation. Sweetheart, your cousins are right. You're making us all look bad. This isn't how family treats each other. If you just share, this will all go away. I sat there in the dark, listening to her words over and over. My own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, were leading the charge against me. They weren't just asking me anymore. They were recruiting the whole family to break me down. That was the night something inside me snapped. I realized this wasn't about helping. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't even about family anymore. This was greed, pure and simple. And my parents had chosen greed over me. It's a strange, hollow feeling when you finally accept that the people you thought would love you unconditionally actually love money more. That no matter what you do, no matter how much you give, it will never be enough. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, one thought echoed in my mind. If I give in now, I'll lose everything. Not just the money, my dignity, my future, my grandparents' trust. And I knew then that I had to make a choice. Either I let my family keep tearing me apart, piece by piece, or I stand my ground, even if it means standing alone. The constant calls, the guilt trips, the pressure. It all came to a breaking point. I realized I had two choices: cave in and hand over millions to people who saw me as nothing but a bank account, or stand firm and protect not only the money, but my grandparents' wishes and my own sanity. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. I remember the moment I drew the line clearly. My parents had come over, uninvited, standing in my living room, like prosecutors in a courtroom. My dad crossed his arms and said, "We've given you everything. Now it's time for you to give back. Hand over a portion of that inheritance, so we can retire comfortably." My mom chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Sweetheart, you don't need all that money. We're your parents. Don't you think we deserve some comfort after all we sacrificed for you?" My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. I took a deep breath and looked them both in the eye. "You already got your inheritance," I said firmly. The will was crystal clear. This money isn't family property. It's mine. Stop trying to take what doesn't belong to you. The room went silent for a moment. My dad's face turned red with anger. My mom's jaw dropped like she couldn't believe I had actually spoken those words. For once, I wasn't their obedient child. I wasn't the kid who bowed under pressure. I was standing up for myself. When they started yelling again, I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I asked them to leave. "If you can't respect me, then you can't be in my house." My voice shook, but I meant every word. Watching them storm out was one of the hardest moments of my life, but also one of the most freeing. That night, I sat at my desk and made a plan. First, I cut off my parents financially. No more loans, no more help with bills, no more empty promises that they'd pay me back someday. If they wanted money, they'd have to look elsewhere, because I wasn't their personal ATM anymore. Next, I blocked relatives who only contacted me with their hands out. Cousins, uncles, family friends. I went through my phone, my social media, and hit block on anyone who treated me like a dollar sign instead of a human being. It hurt, but at the same time, it was like clearing weeds out of a garden. Suddenly, I could breathe again. Then, I hired financial advisors, real professionals. I explained the situation, and together we built a plan to protect the inheritance. We set up trusts, investments, and accounts that couldn't be easily touched. It wasn't just about the money. It was about making sure I was secure, that my future was safe, and that no one could swoop in and take advantage of me. For the first time since the inheritance, I felt like I was in control. It wasn't easy. The guilt still crept in at night. I'd lie in bed and hear echoes of my parents' voices. Don't be selfish. Remember who raised you. Family comes first. But then I'd remind myself, family isn't supposed to manipulate you. Family isn't supposed to weaponize love just to get money. What I was doing wasn't selfish. It was survival. The next time my mom tried to call, I didn't answer. The next time my dad sent a text demanding, "What's fair?" I deleted it. Without reading. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped justifying. Because the truth didn't matter to them. They only cared about what I could give them. And little by little, something shifted inside me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just protecting the money. I was protecting myself, my peace of mind, my boundaries, my future. Yes, It was lonely. Yes, I cried more nights than I'd like to admit, but every time I checked my accounts and saw the money invested, growing safe from greedy hands, I felt a wave of relief. It wasn't about being rich. It was about being free. That's when it finally clicked. My grandparents hadn't just left me money. They had left me a lifeline. They knew what my parents were capable of. They knew this exact battle would happen, and they trusted me to stand strong. So I did. I drew the line. And for the first time ever, I wasn't the scared, broke kid who let everyone walk all over him. I was someone who could say no and mean it. Here's the truth I had to accept. Money doesn't really change people. It reveals who they already are. My grandparents left me $31.5 million, not because I was their favorite, not because they wanted to cause division, but because they trusted me. They believed I would use it wisely. They believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. My parents, on the other hand, didn't see it as trust or a blessing. They saw it as a jackpot. They saw dollar signs instead of their child. That was the heartbreaking part. Instead of celebrating with me, instead of saying, "We're proud of you," or "Your grandparents wanted the best for you," they turned against me. They chose greed over love. And once that curtain was pulled back, I couldn't unsee it. I spent a lot of nights wrestling with the guilt. I asked myself questions like, am I being selfish? Should I just give them a portion to keep the peace? But every time I replayed the lawyer's words, every time I opened the will and read the lines my grandparents had written, the answer became clear. This is for your future. It is not to be claimed as shared family property. That sentence saved me, because it reminded me that this inheritance wasn't about anyone else's comfort. It was about mine. It wasn't about keeping toxic relatives happy. It was about honoring my grandparents' wishes. I realized something else too. If I gave in once, it would never end. If I handed over $1 million, they'd demand 5. If I gave 5, they'd demand 10. And no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. Because people who see you as a walking bank account will never stop asking until you're empty. So I made a decision. I will not buy my parents' approval. I will not rent their love with money. I will not hand my future over to people who never had my best interests at heart. Instead, I'll use the inheritance the way my grandparents intended. I've already put most of it into investments, things that grow quietly, steadily, in the background. I've set up a trust so that even if someone tries to sue me or pressure me, they can't get their hands on it. I'm working with financial advisors who understand that this isn't about flaunting wealth. It's about building stability, and beyond the money, I'm building something bigger. A life my grandparents would be proud of. I want to travel, not just for vacations, but to learn. I want to invest in my education, maybe start a business that matters, maybe create something lasting. I want to use some of the money for good causes, in quiet ways that don't make me a target for leeches, but still help people who truly need it. Because, to me, $31.5 million isn't just money. It's freedom. It's freedom from debt. Freedom from begging for overtime at dead-end jobs. Freedom from worrying if I'll be able to pay rent next month. It's the freedom to say no when people try to use me. The freedom to build a future without depending on anyone else's approval. And that's what I intend to protect at all costs. To my parents. It will always look like greed. They'll tell relatives that I'm selfish, ungrateful, cold-hearted. Maybe some people will believe them, but I know the truth. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Protecting your future isn't greedy. Sometimes saying no is the only way to honor yourself and the people who truly loved you. My grandparents didn't give me this inheritance so I could hand it over to people who never respected me. They gave it to me because they saw potential. They wanted me to have a better life than they did. And I refused to let their gift be twisted into a family feud over fairness. Fairness isn't giving away what isn't owed. Fairness is respecting the wishes of the people who worked their entire lives to build something and chose who they wanted to leave it to. So here are my final words. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine. I won't feel guilty for saying no. And I won't let money buy me into toxic relationships. Because, at the end of the day, I only have one life. And thanks to my grandparents, I finally have the means to live it on my own terms. And that's exactly what I'm going to do.